All right. Well, welcome to the sixth episode of Community Conversations on Race. We are
Not live.
not live. Oh,
Hang on.
that was a live.
No live.
All right. Welcome to the sixth episode of Community Conversations on Race. We are very happy to have all of you here today. This evening, we're going to be talking about an issue that is a very important one, but one that doesn't really get discussed that often, which is the challenge of raising a child to not be racist, surrounded by a racist world. So just as a reminder of how we're going to do things today, we definitely want to hear from the Facebook Live community and have our panelists answer as many questions as possible. So if you have questions that you'd like them to answer, start sending those in around 6:10, 6:15, and we'll try to get those answered for you. And again, just like last week, our discussion this evening, it isn't meant to divide or set precedents or promote any particular agenda. What we're trying to do is just give these ladies a platform to talk about their personal experiences and their feelings, and hopefully to promote some good conversation amongst each other and the community. So let me go ahead and introduce our panel and we will get right to it. So first we have Johnetta Dedrick. Johnetta was born and raised in Vallejo, California, the Valley Joe. She was born into a fairly diverse community. She moved to Santa Rosa in the mid 80s and she described that experience as an awakening. So I'm actually kind of interested to see what was very awakening about it. She worked in the field of drug and alcohol services in residential and outpatient treatment until she came to work for Community Action Partnership in 1997. And since then, she's worked in the housing department, assisting families in finding and maintaining permanent housing. Then we have Katie Whitaker. Katie moved to Sonoma County from Los Angeles 3 years ago with her husband, Dennis, and their sons, Sol and Lennon. Sol is 11 and Lennon's 4. And she's worked in the theater on and off stage for her entire life. And she runs the nonprofit children's theater company called Young at Heart Theater, which is at the Raven in Healdsburg. And Katie also works for CAP here as a consultant on our communications team. And then last but not least, we have Joy Dehnert. And I'm gonna tell you how Joy introduced herself in the bio that she wrote to me, which will tell you all you need to know about Joy. Joy Dehnert is her name. Rent assistance is her game. Okay. So Joy was born and raised here in Sonoma County. She's a first generation American. Her parents are from Kenya. She attended SRJC and finished her degree in psychology online. She is married with 2 boys and she has been at Community Action for almost 2 years. So panelists, welcome. Thank you very much for being here this evening. So just to start us off, maybe you guys can tell us a little bit about your family dynamics. Joy, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I can start. Like Cory said, my parents are from Kenya, so I'm first generation American. And growing up in Santa Rosa specifically, we actually grew up more on the southwest side. So a lot of my friends growing up were also first generation as well, whether it was from Mexico, Eritrea, Laos, Vietnam, a few other places. So those were my people growing up, and they still are my people today. Still on the southwest side, loving it. Go Lobos. And so growing up, my parents being from Kenya, it was a different upbringing, I would say, because it was more about working hard and getting to where you wanted to go. Education was key, doing well in school and reaching that goal that we set for ourselves.
Very nice. And what about your current family dynamic? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my husband is white, and so our kids are mixed. And so my kids are, I would say, fortunate to grow up in a family that's half Black, Kenyan, and half white. So they have, and my friends that I grew up with from various other cultures, they have all of that around them. So it's not uncommon for my kids to go to a family get together, whether it be our family or another friend's family, and hear different languages, hear different cultures, dance, music, that kind of thing.
Very nice. And Katie?
So I grew up in Los Angeles, mostly born in San Francisco, and then moved to Los Angeles with my family. Grew up in a very theatrical family. My mom's a theater director for children, and growing up, we always had a really diverse group of friends. So that's always been a part of my life and my family values. I have 2 sons. One is named Sol, and he's 11, and Lennon, who is 4. When I always knew that I wanted to have kids. It was probably my biggest priority. And when I started on that adventure, I had some, trouble having kids. And so we started with the adoption route, and we adopted Sol from the LA foster care system. And Sol is half Caucasian and half Mexican. And then I gave birth to Lennon, and Lennon is really, really white, like me, like as white as you can be. So that's an interesting dynamic in our household. And so now we're in Sonoma County. We've been here for 3 years, and yeah.
Okay, very good. And then Johnetta, your son obviously is, he's grown and out of the house. What was, when he was younger though, what was your family dynamic?
Well, living in Vallejo, like I said, I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, and Vallejo has quite a large Black population. And there was only 2 schools when I was growing up there. 2 schools, basically 2 schools. It was mainly white and mainly Black school. But I was a single parent, a young single parent, and but my family was very close. So my son was raised with the benefit of my father, my brother, his very close knit family. And my sister, both of us had our kids around the same time. So him and his cousin, Mac Dre, for those who know him, they grew up together. We grew up together in a very close knit household. But the relationships in our family were diverse. Like marriages and children are very, very mixed in my family. So what the comment I made about coming from Vallejo to Santa Rosa, yes, was awakening, because it was back when I came here, cow pastures and John Burke Society, and it was a very white community that I came to and had to adjust to. That took me some years to adjust to. So my son, basically he was involved in lots and lots of sports. So my father really kind of took ownership, and my brother, we kind of raised him in sports. So, but then he too came here to Santa Rosa, and got involved in the community here. He did okay with that. He had a lot of mixed race friends that he played football with, and sports families that he hung out with. So we didn't have too much trouble there.
Okay, good. So this is definitely a very interesting mix on this panel. So I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. So for Joy and Katie, because you guys are currently raising kids, what are some of the struggles that you guys face trying to raise your kids to be anti-racist? As we said, in a place that a world that's racist, but in a county that's not super diverse and has a tendency to be racist sometimes. What are some of the struggles that you guys face trying to do that?
I think that right now, right now we have an administration that is running our country that not only allows or turns the other way, but encourages racism and division. So for me, I shield my children from the president because I don't know what is going to come out of his mouth. we have a president that won't say that Black Lives Matter. And when you have that type of role model, I think that right now is a difficult time raising kids, especially, my 4-year-old, this is the only, administration that he's seen. And even though he's 4, kids listen to everything, so I think right now, that is a big obstacle for parents. And but for me, personally, with Soul, I've had a lot of instances in public where in front of Soul, he's my 11-year-old, they say to me, people would say, he doesn't look like you. Why doesn't he look like you in front of him? And this has happened a lot. And me, I've always said, because he's adopted. And then people are like, embarrassed, they put their foot in their mouth. But, for Soul, he doesn't look like me. He looks nothing like me, and Lennon looks just like me. So I think for me, that's a struggle, and just making, Soul has made a lot of comments, why I'm the only person in our family with brown eyes. And so that's probably the biggest struggle for our family, and making sure that that he celebrates his differences and his culture. And
Yeah, definitely. Enjoy.
My kids are pretty young still. Ezra is 8 or almost 8, and David just turned 5. I honestly can't say that I haven't had very many struggles. It's interesting, as a Black woman and as light as my kids are, no one has ever, like Katie has explained, no one has ever said to me, "Are those your kids?" And when they were really little, they looked Native American or Alaskan, or they really looked like they are Asian, but no one has ever said that to me. But so I think, honestly, the biggest struggle for me is finding the balance between informing them and keeping them safe. Because I don't want to scare them or instill fear, but I also want to prepare them. So I honestly think that's my biggest struggle in raising mixed kids today.
Yeah. Have either of your kids at this young age, have either of them ever brought up any maybe surprising topics or things that you really didn't know how to answer about race?
No. I asked Ezra, my older one, if anyone has ever said anything to him about how he looks, and he said no. Or about his skin color, he said no. David, who's a little bit more outspoken, has just out of very childlike, like, "Oh, that person's really dark." And I said, "Yeah, that's like," because it was a picture actually from Sudan or something like that. So yeah, that's, the people from that area, they tend to be really dark. And people come in all shades and colors and sizes. So nothing too shocking, I would say. Not yet.
Okay. What about you, Katie?
I asked Soul the other day if he had ever experienced anything that he felt like was racism, and he told me that he hasn't, which is wonderful. I think he's had like bullying situations at school. Somebody called him unibrow boy, which, for him, he's always loved his unibrow. And we talk about how he's like Frida Kahlo. So he's super excited about his unibrow. And, but that's probably the worst thing that he, has experienced, which probably, if you ask me in 5 years, that won't be true anymore. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad for him that, I had a situation with Lennon where I was telling you guys, I had just moved here, and my family, we were walking around the square in Sonoma, and I was holding Lennon, and this white man came out of a bar, And he looked at me and he looked at Lenin and he said, I can barely say this. He said, "Wow, great job, lady. You made Hitler's wet dream." And it was like one of those moments where I didn't know what to say. I was shocked. And I mean, he was telling me good job, you know. So yeah, that was pretty bad.
That would probably knock you off knock you off your feet.
I mean, if I didn't have him in my arms, I don't know what I would have done. But
and tell Soul to embrace his unibrow. I loved my unibrow when I was a kid. People said I looked like I'll be sure. I loved it.
he loves it. I asked him if he wanted me to shave it or, you know, whatever you would do. And
Pluck it.
No, pluck it. Right. He said, no, I want to keep it. I'm like, good.
Nice. Very nice.
So I just wanted to say that to comment about what Joy said is, how do you know when when, at what age is it appropriate to start having those conversations with your kids? It's hard to know because you never know when it's going to happen. I was saying, I think I told you guys before that my nephew, when he was he may have been about 4 years old and at a playground, and he's mixed race, but the kid called him the N-word. So, and at that age, you're innocent, probably don't know what it means yet, but at what point do you start having those discussions with young kids without putting fear in them about other people and other races? I remember me growing up, my parents were raised, they were from the South. They were from Mississippi, both of them. So they went through the very hard, racist, the blacks only, whites only type of generation. So I remember my mother used to say, "You can't trust white people," and we never knew what that meant until we had to have our own experiences to know what that meant, or if it meant anything to us. But at what point do you start teaching that young children about the world today that we live in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are some of the challenges? This is a question I've always wondered. What are some of the challenges of raising a mixed kid who at some point is going to get judged by the people that he comes in contact with based on one of his or her races? So what are some of the challenges that you guys either are facing now or that you kind of anticipate facing in the future?
Joy, you want to?
Yeah, I'll go. Well, I imagine for my kids being half black and half white, at some point they won't be black enough, and at some point they won't be white enough for any various situation. So I imagine they will encounter that for sure in their lifetime. And even as a first generation American, sometimes I was considered not black enough. So I sort of know how that feels, even though it's like, hello, what do you mean not black enough? But people are going to say what they're going to say and it's not just from one side, it's from all the sides, that things, get said and people get hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Katie?
I think by talking and being transparent, celebrating who he is and helping him to be proud of himself. Soul is, I think with different kids, you would approach this in different ways. Soul is shyer. He's not as confident, and so he doesn't talk as much. So it's harder to pull things out of him. And so with him, I feel like I have to be a little bit more careful when talking about subjects like this and helping him to understand and to just have that confidence and talk about it and how beautiful differences are. But education and with Lennon, he's more confident. He's the kid that, he's a very kind person, so I say this, but I need to be very clear with him and be aggressively like anti-racist, because he's like the kid that will speak up in class. He's the kid that will fight for the other kid. Like he has a very large opinions already at 4 years old. So I think the way that I talk with them each, it's just different. But I think talking and just being transparent and educating on real history. Yeah.
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 Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what Katie said, having conversation, I really think instilling in them who they are, no matter what the world says around them about who they are, really speaking life into them about who they are is absolutely key. Because the world's gonna have all kinds of things about who they are, or gonna say all kinds of things, but if they know, they can just, brush that off real quick.
And just like love yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Johnetta, I have a question for you. What are some of the things that you would tell your children or your child now if you were raising them versus 30 years ago when they were being brought up? What are some of the differences that you may, or different approaches that you might take now versus then?
Well, I was thinking that probably the best, talking is one thing, but also modeling behavior. When people say something that's inappropriate, just if you model and reject that information that, because our kids are going to watch you, kids are going to watch, they could watch what adults do around them. And I was thinking that when you shut down those kind of conversations, or when you speak truth, when somebody is making comments about, another race, or so I think what I would do differently, or do today, is be very verbal very verbal about right and wrong, and also model that, because that passive, being in a room when people are talking stuff about other races or whatever the situation might be, and if you don't say anything, the kid is going to make a determination on his own about that thing. So I think speaking up in the moment, and modeling behavior that rejects racism is what I would do differently, or not differently, but what I would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Good point. Have any of you had to overcome or battle any internal biases when it comes to raising your kids? Because, as Johnetta said, a lot of times kids, they get their behavior from how the parents act. And, we all have our internal struggles with different things, or biases, or, or prejudices against about whatever. So has any of that been a struggle for any of you guys? Ms. Katie?
So I think this is a tough question for me. I had to get over certain, I came to love Soul's birth mother. And, it was tough, and it wasn't, she had issues, and there were, I could go into it, but there's a lot of reasons that Soul came to us. But I knew that his birth mother loved him, and I'm grateful for her, because she ultimately brought my son to me. So I think, when I was first, the adoption took like 3 years, but over those 3 years, there's a lot of emotions, but I think that was something, I don't know if that's the answer to your question, but that's what I think about when I hear that. And that was something I had to get over. Any anger for what had happened to him, get rid of that, and love her. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. And Joy, did you have anything that you had to overcome yourself not pass on to your kids?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Yeah, because no, I can't think of anything.
Okay, good. Now, Johnetta, I had a question for you because you said that your son had a lot of different male influences growing up from your dad and his uncle's sports coaches. So dealing with racism and things that he might have experienced was maybe not a subject that you and him talked about that much. But tell us about some of the stuff that you saw your nephews go through and how that maybe affected you, because I know there was a few things that happened.
Well, one of my stepbrother, who actually we don't even use the word step or half brother. He's my father's son. He's my brother. He got murdered by the police in Vallejo probably about 10 years ago. You know, Vallejo PD has, you know, a history of excessive force. Yeah, he was gunned down by the police in Vallejo. My nephew, Andre, Matt Dre, as people know him, he was pretty much run out of town by the Vallejo Police Department and was not able to come into the Vallejo city limits. So my family, you know, not to say not either one of those were angels, but it still affected us, or me, in a way that, because I saw it firsthand. I saw the treatment. I saw the, you know, going through the whole court process and the lies that were told in the court and all that. And I know throughout those years, I try to figure out, you know, what's real and what's not real, what's true and what's not true. And it's hard to know because they got their game down. And I'm not here to bash police, but that's what happened. So I didn't necessarily, I can't remember your question, but my thought process now has gotten to about those incidents and trying to decipher, you know, what was the race, what was racism and what was not, what was, you know, it is hard to know. Other than the fact that these are people are paid to uphold the law and not kill citizens. So now, so I was thinking about, we talked a little bit about this earlier, and I was thinking about what would I say to a child now about how to interact with the police? And I was thinking, I know situations where the person acted just the way they were told to act and still ended up with a bad outcome. So it's hard to know really what to tell a child or nephews, nephew, we're talking about kids, what to tell them about the police, because you can tell them to do the right thing, and because of bias, it still end up with a bad outcome. So that one, it's hard to know.
Yeah. So just kind of dovetailing on that, how have the last 2 or 3 months and the things that have been going on, how has that kind of affected your view of the world?
Well, I had to say this, but it has made me a lot more paranoid about who I am in the company of. I have seen stuff on, I don't do a lot of social media, but the little that I do, even on Nextdoor, which is a neighborhood app, everybody knows, some of the comments that are made by people, you know, around Black Lives Matter and, you know, whatever the social situation is right now, are kind of stunning to me that in 2020, some of the comments that people make about Black people, you know, seeing more of the Confederate flags. And again, I didn't see that stuff from Vallejo to Sonoma County. I never knew what a Confederate flag was. Well, no, I take that back. When we used to take trips to Mississippi, I saw it in the South, but coming here to Sonoma County, you know, I would see them going further up north. But so it seems like I see them a lot again. And also, I have developed a different attitude about the American flag right now. And I know hopefully that'll pass. But when I see people flying a Confederate flag and an American flag, I'm like, the message is clear. So when I'm walking around the neighborhoods, like I walk a lot and see these American flags, my mind starts thinking, okay, what is the message here? So it's made me a little bit more paranoid about my surroundings and about the people that I thought I knew, because I'm finding out that people harbor these attitudes that that are now they're pretty vocal about. So, and I'm trying not to paint everybody with the same brush, but it's hard to know who's who and what's what nowadays.
Yeah. Okay. And what about you, Joy?
Yeah, I was going through a neighborhood the other day and I saw a big white truck with an American flag and I thought the same thing, like, But I mean, I don't want to feel that way. I really don't. But I don't know what about that makes me feel that way. And I'm proud to be an American, America. But I just am definitely more cautious. What's interesting is at the grocery store, now a lot more white people like make small talk with me, which I think is interesting because it's not like it matters where I'm looking for it, but maybe they're just working out stuff in their own selves, which I'm fine with. But and it's never nothing serious.
You're the new black friend.
Yeah.
You're gonna have one.
So it definitely is changing, and I'm just hoping and praying for the better.
And has that affected how you raise your kids at all, or how you anything about that?
Honestly, I feel like I want to shelter them, like until this world works it out. Thank goodness for one good thing for COVID is we're at home, we are sheltering. So they're not much in the outside world. So we're able to keep this mess from them until, I know every family is different, but until the time is right, for sure.
Yeah. What about you, Katie?
I feel like as a white woman over the last 3 months now, I have always been anti-racist. I've always had a diverse group of friends. Since I was little, I've always been attracted to people that are different than me because I've always found it more interesting. But I have felt over the last 3 months a fire in me to not only raise my kids not to be racist, but to aggressively raise them to be anti-racist and acknowledge privilege and vocally acknowledge my own and look at my life and do more, take the privilege that I have just because of the color of my skin and do something with it, and teach my kids to do that, and to never be silent ever, and to admit that I know that there have been times where I have been too silent in situations. And so to look at myself and be honest and to have those conversations with my kids, even though Lennon is 4, I have started to have more conversations than I did by the time Sol was 4. And something about now and with what I am seeing, It's making me angry, and I'm just trying to turn that into action. When I was adopting Soul, I had a lot of white people say to me, at least a handful, would you be okay if you got a black one? Like phrased like that. And it was not just one person. And I was like, yeah, but I was naive. I was a naive white person too. Questions like that surprised me. So I had the privilege of questions like that surprising me because I'm white. And, our system is so fundamentally racist that when I'm adopting from the foster care system, like I wasn't going to get a white one. There are very few white kids in the foster care system. And so just, I think for me, the last 3 months, a lot of thinking, a lot of talking, and a lot of figuring out how to, make sure that I start with my family and be aggressive about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good, interesting. So we have some questions coming in, a few more than I thought we would get. So let's get to some of those right now. I want to hear you guys' opinion on these. So we have one question that is regarding shielding your children. How do you deal with potential anger towards law enforcement so as to not project that onto your children? I'll let whoever wants to take that on.
Joy, do you want to take that, or?
I would just say it starts with myself. The anger, because it is easy to get angry. It is easy to get triggered about what goes on. Even locally, when Andy Lopez got shot, I don't know how many years ago, walking through a park. And especially being a kid and having kids, that was just so close to home in Santa Rosa. So I really watching what I say, and like Johnetta said, watching my actions in response to these things that are wrong and outrageous and unnerving. You can go on and on and on, but I think when the anger comes out, making sure that it's like healthy, because it is possible to have healthy anger in these situations.
Mm-hmm. Johnetta, what do you think about that?
Well, I think I was thinking about what John Lewis said about making good trouble, but which is what Katie's talking about, making good trouble, which is speaking up when things are wrong and not being silent. But one of the things I want to say is the flip side of that is one of the events that we have here, I'm probably not this year because of COVID, is where the shop with the cop, where the police start very young. The police start building relationships with kids when they're very young. So that event every year where they come and take them, not come, but meet them at Target and take them shopping, develop a relationship with them to show or teach the kids a different side of police than what is projected, and which is, some of it's real, in television and media and all that. So starting off with positive relationships at a very young age. But then there's the flip side of that. So these are very complicated conversations and very complicated choices. And yeah, it's important not to project onto our kids or the kids even around me at this house where I work, that kind of anger and negativity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Katie, did you have anything on that one?
I mean, I think before this, that was a very naive part of me being a white person and not having to be afraid of the police. and because of that privilege, not really thinking about how I have a kid who could have a problem with the police. So, I'm going to have those conversations with him. And I think it's not all of the police, but this is a problem. So to make sure that that's clear, but again, just to talk about it. And I think this is an area that I hadn't thought much of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably the one thing a lot of people are coming away with, that there's just a lot of things that they didn't have to think about before and never did.
Yeah.
They're starting to think about. Okay, got another question. Let's see. She says, what can we do to advocate for more Black history in schools? Black History Month is only celebrated in Roseland schools by a couple of examples, i.e. Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman. They do not have the community involvement the way the Latino culture does, and Black history is very lightly talked about. So I guess her question is, what can people do to advocate for more Black history in schools?
I mean, that is, a complicated question. I mean, it's a lot to do with policy and what a school is required to, changing that, and teaching real history. And hopefully, I'm hopeful that everything that is happening right now, that will be one area that is changed, that we have change there, so that it is taught correctly and it is celebrated correctly. And Juneteenth is not a holiday that, white people are finding out about last month.
Right.
So.
Johnetta, what do you think?
Well, I don't know that I know the person who, I think I know the person who asked that question, because she's very active in trying to teach her son, who is, if I'm thinking of the right person, who is biracial, and she is very active in teaching him his history, his ethnic, his racial background, his just everything, just to be a fully rounded biracial. And by the way, when we talk about biracial, usually when the kid is half Black and half something else, they're looked at as a Black child. And that's just the reality of it. As far as the schools, I think that's going to be a hard nut to crack. Is that a bad term? Anyway, that's going to be a hard thing to change the school system, because in 2020, if there's no more education than what is being taught right now around our real history, and schools have been around forever, it's kind of surprising to me, and I don't know what to say about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, curriculum is curriculum. I mean, probably the only, I know when I was in 8th grade, I had seen Roots not too many years before that, and so during Black History Month, I basically just hounded my teacher until they let me bring it in. And I think we took maybe three classes and watched about 3 hours worth, which was all, it was only a third of it, or a quarter of it. But I mean, squeaky wheel gets the grease most of the time. So if you want your school to do something, just keep bothering them until they do it to shut you up, basically. Okay, let's see. This one might be, I don't know if you have any. If you don't have any, that's okay. But someone wants to know if you have any recommendations for relevant children's history books, 100 pages or longer. So any relevant history books? I don't know why the 100 pages, or 100 pages or shorter. It could be shorter.
I don't off the top of my head.
I don't either, but
Yeah.
I just kind of going back to the other question, just going, not waiting for the school to teach our children, but teaching the children ourselves. I think that is a huge part of being parents, is teaching them, and with them probably not going back to school this year, it's all on us.
There's so much pain behind that smile.
Oh, so much pain.
It's good that there's a lot of good wine in Sonoma County.
So you know what? If we're going to be the teachers next year, then it's our job as teachers to put this into the curriculum for the kids to know the truth. I think it's so important to learn about Black history. I think it's important to learn about Native Americans, the truth, not this pretend Thanksgiving stuff that they learn. So I think that, that's research, and obviously make it kid appropriate for your age child, and doing the work, because it's our job how our kids turn out, not necessarily at school.
Yeah.
My guess too is that, Katie, just like you were saying, a lot of white people just learning about Juneteenth. This is a guess on my part, that the teachers in school that are teaching what they know. And if they didn't learn Black history, if they didn't learn about Native American culture, if they didn't learn those things, they can't teach it. And there's a curriculum, but you can't give away what you don't have. And
it's our job to break the cycle. We see it, you know better, you do better.
Okay, another question for you guys. Let's see. This one might be more so for Joy and Johnetta, but their question is, what can white mothers and community members do to support you?
Would you repeat that, please?
Yeah, it was, what can white mothers and community members do to support you?
Support us personally, or the community, Black community?
I'm guessing a little bit of both.
I would say, like I said earlier, is to speak up and don't be passive when you see something wrong, or hear comments, or people being mistreated or discriminated against, or marginalized, to speak up, because in these days, you have a bigger voice than we did, just because the way the system is, the way the system works. But I would say not to be a passive participant.
Okay, good. Joy, what do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Johnetta. It just starts with everyday conversations. And if they have a voice in their kids' school to push for that change in curriculum, if they have a voice at their job where they see discrimination, if they have a voice in the community, then use it. But it's on all kinds of levels, whether it's personal or in your family, in the schools, in your job, to speak up and speak out, because there's all kinds of moments. And I guess just to be aware of the little microaggressions, because it might not be a huge thing. It might be a little side comment, but if you stop someone, and you don't have to be rude about it. You can be nice and you can be kind, and say something to them, and then they maybe realize what they're doing, and then they pass it on. So it can start with one conversation.
Okay. Then Katie, you have any thoughts on that?
I think, white people have to be honest, and vocal, and really, I'm as a white person, I mean, I'm sure as any person, I'm tired of hearing white people talk about how they don't have privilege and how they grew up poor and they worked for everything that they got, and because while that's true, I've always worked hard. I didn't grow up with money, but I grew up with privilege just because I'm white. And I think that it's time for white people, parents to really, really acknowledge that, admit that if they have to, and act accordingly and teach your children accordingly and teach your children love and not tolerance, but to celebrate our differences.
Okay, good. So we are coming to the end. So I want to give each of you guys an opportunity, each of you ladies, an opportunity to just kind of give us your closing thoughts on either what we talked about today or just kind of what your thoughts are in general. So let me start with you, Johnetta. Go ahead and give us your thoughts.
I don't know. I was thinking about what Joy said about the microaggressions, and I was thinking about how me as a Black woman who goes through my day almost every day that I'm out in the world, being aware of the microaggressions, being just hypersensitive to what goes on around me, where, as Katie said, she doesn't have to think about those things. Still, to this day, for no reason, when a police car pulls up behind me and he might be minding his own business going on somewhere else, it still makes me nervous. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me nervous. And then I have to tell myself, you have not done anything. So the things that it's exhausting. The things that I have to think about every day is exhausting. The things that I read on Nextdoor that people say, oh, somebody picked some flowers out of my yard, or somebody stepped on my lawn. And I was thinking, those are privileges too, because I wouldn't think about stepping on a lawn, somebody's lawn that I don't know. I wouldn't think of going to somebody's yard and clipping a flower just because I like it. I might get dropped where I stand in somebody's yard, a Black person in a neighborhood doing those kinds of things. So I read those things and think, wow, that's something I wouldn't even think about doing. So just to know, just to say that it's exhausting, and it's also, I feel really, what's the word? The fact that there's a lot of white people that have gotten involved and are engaged in this whole, the whole movement right now, because we need the voices of people other than just Black people, and that support is really necessary. So I like the way things are going. I mean, some things not so much, but the fact that so many people have gotten involved and being allies and supportive of trying to make some changes, because we cannot continue to live like this.
Good. Ms. Katie?
Parenting, I think, is definitely the hardest job that I've ever had. There's no book on how to do it. You feel like a failure every day. And I think that we can't stop fighting for this actively because we don't know how. We're gonna make mistakes along the way, but especially as a white person, raising two kids and one is biracial, like I'm not going to stop, aggressively making sure that my kids are raised anti-racist and to teach love and compassion and get involved in my community and do what I can and vote with those priorities in mind. And yeah, I think that's about all I have to say.
All right. Joy Dehnert is your name. Financial assistance is your game. Closing thoughts on to you.
For me, I would just say one thing that I say to my kids all the time is be aware of your body, like where you are in relation to other people, if you're going to hit somebody, if you're not. But as an adult, we need to do the same thing, be aware of our bodies and our minds and our thoughts. And see if you have never heard someone speak from another race or another culture or another something, then that is 100% on you. And to hear the voices of people who are different from you, that is huge. And to really hear them without judgment, without without bias as much as you can. And just little by little, I mean, these things don't happen. Sometimes, huge policies, but it takes little by little for change to happen. And we'll celebrate those as along the way. We can't, we will celebrate the little victories every day, every conversation, everything along the way. And when George Floyd died, it really rocked the world. And one thing I am happy is like all the stuff that has been stirred up in hearts and minds of people, and the conversations that have been had, and the change. It's coming. So hold on.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, listen, we appreciate all of you ladies and your perspectives, and really just taking the time to kind of give us a window into your thoughts and into the experiences that you've had, and not only in your personal lives, but in trying to raise your children in a certain way. And that can be difficult, especially in the world that we're living in. So we appreciate that very much. Katie, Joy, Johnetta, thank you so much. Facebook Live community, thank you for your questions. Dennis, thank you for keeping it together on the technical side. Hopefully everything went off without a hitch. Next week, we will have a panel of African-American women that I'm told are extremely dynamic. So you'll have to tune back in next week to see what that's all about. And I know I said last week it was going to be a different moderator. But my bad. I was on again this week. Next week, it won't be me. So if you're tired of me, it'll be somebody completely different. So come back next week. Check out the 7th episode in the series, Community Conversations on Race. We're out.
Thank you.
Bye.